Another important aspect of the information mentioned in the verses of the Quran is the developmental stages of a human in the mother's womb. It is stated in the verses that in the mother's womb, first the bones develop, and then the muscles form which wrap around these bones. We then formed the drop into a clot, and formed the clot into a lump, and formed the lump into bones, and clothed the bones in flesh, and then brought him into being as another creature. Blessed be God, the best of creators. Embryology is a branch of science that studies the development of embryos in the mother's womb. Until very recently, embryologists assumed that the bones and muscles in an embryo developed at the same time. For this reason, for a long time, some people claimed that these verses were in conflict with science. Yet, advanced microscopic research conducted by virtue of new technological developments has revealed that the revelation of the Quran is word by word correct. These examinations at the microscopic level showed that the development inside the mother's womb takes place in just the way it is described in the verses. First, the cartilage tissue of the embryo ossifies. Then, muscular cells that are selected from among the tissue around the bones come together and wrap around these bones. This event is described in a scientific publication with the following words. During the 7th week, the skeleton begins to spread throughout the body, and the bones take their familiar shapes. At the end of the 7th week, and during the 8th week, the muscles take their positions around the bone forms. In short, man's developmental stages, as they are described in the Quran, are in perfect harmony with the findings of modern embryology.
Research carried out in recent years has revealed that the prefrontal area, lying in the frontal part of the skull, is responsible for the management of particular functions of the brain. This area of the cerebrum is also responsible for planning, motivation, and initiating good and evil behavior, and it is responsible for telling lies and the truth. A book entitled Essentials of Anatomy and Physiology says, in relation to its involvement in motivation, the prefrontal area is also thought to be the functional center for aggression. Parallel information to these scientific facts discovered by scientists in the last 60 years was also imparted in the Quran 14 centuries ago. No, indeed, if he does not stop, we will grab him by the forelock, a lying, sinful forelock. The expression, the lying, sinful forelock, in this verse is most remarkable. This demonstrates a close parallel to the activities carried out in the front part of the brain. The formation of milk in animals' bodies is described thus in one verse of the Quran. There is instruction for you in cattle. From the contents of their bellies, from between the dung and blood, we give you pure milk to drink. easy for drinkers to swallow. In order to better comprehend this verse, it will be useful to briefly summarize digestive and circulatory systems of animals. The food animals eat is digested in the digestive system by being subjected to a number of stages. The digested substances enter the bloodstream through the intestinal wall. The complex chemical substances that enter the bloodstream from the digestive system are distributed to the relevant organs in the body by means of the circulatory system. Some of this mixture is distributed to the muscles and other bodily tissues, and some reaches the milk glands to be turned into milk. Like the other bodily tissues, the milk glands are nourished by nutriments brought to them by the blood. The blood, therefore, plays a most important role in the collection and transfer of nutriments. Milk is secreted by the milk glands in the wake of all these stages, and thus perfectly clean, snow-white and nourishing milk is produced from the blood and semi-digested foodstuffs that human beings cannot consume directly. Human beings are neither able to directly consume the semi-digested foodstuffs in an animal's stomach, nor the animal's blood itself. Moreover, if they do consume either one of these, or a combination of both, it can result in serious food poisoning, or even death. Yet, thanks to the exceedingly complex biological systems He has created, God bestows on us a health-giving, clean, and nutritious drink from these fluids. The formation of milk is a great miracle on its own. Yet the fact that such detailed information concerning it is provided in the Quran is by itself yet another miracle. The description of the biological formation of milk in this verse is in considerable agreement with the facts revealed by modern-day science. It is quite clear that such information, requiring detailed knowledge of mammals' digestive systems, could not have been known at the time when the Quran was revealed. This information is one of the proofs of the omniscience of Almighty God. He creates you stage by stage in your mother's wombs in threefold darkness. That is God, your Lord. Sovereignty is His. There is no deity but Him. So what has made you deviate? Modern biology has revealed that the embryological development of the baby takes place in the manner revealed in the verse. The expression, a threefold darkness, indicates three dark regions involved during the development of the embryo. These are the darkness of the abdomen, the darkness of the womb, and the darkness of the placenta. It is also pointed out in this verse that a human being is created in the mother's womb in three distinct stages. In Basic Human Embryology, a fundamental reference text in embryology, this fact is stated as follows. The life in the uterus has three stages: pre-embryonic, first 2.5 weeks, embryonic, until the end of the 8th week, and fetal, from the 8th week to labor. Information on the development in the mother's womb became available only after observations with modern devices. Yet, just like many other scientific facts, in a miraculous way, God draws our attention to these items of information in the verses of the Quran. The fact that such detailed and accurate information was given in the Quran at a time when people had scarce information on medical matters is clear evidence that it is the Word of God.
In the Quran, it is related that man is created in a three-stage process in the mother's womb. He creates you stage by stage in your mother's wombs in a threefold darkness. That is God, your Lord. Sovereignty is His. There is no God but Him. So what has made you deviate? The Arabic expression translated into English as a threefold darkness indicates three dark regions involved during the development of the embryo. These are A, the darkness of the abdomen, B, the darkness of the womb, and C, the darkness of the placenta. As we have seen, modern biology has revealed that the embryological development of the baby takes place in the manner revealed in the verse, in three dark regions. Moreover, advances in the science of embryology show that these regions consist of 3 layers each. The lateral abdominal wall comprises 3 layers. The external oblique, the internal oblique, and the transversus abdominis muscles. Similarly, the wall of the womb also consists of 3 layers. The epimetrium, the myometrium, and the endometrium. Similarly again, the placenta surrounding the embryo also consists of 3 layers: the amnion, the internal membrane around the fetus, the chorion, the middle amnion layer, and the decidua, outer amnion layer. It is also pointed out in this verse that a human being is created in the mother's womb in 3 distinct stages. Indeed, modern biology has revealed that the baby's embryological development takes place in 3 stages in the mother's womb. In Basic Human Embryology, a fundamental reference text in the field of embryology, this fact is stated as follows. The life in the uterus has 3 stages: pre-embryonic, first 2.5 weeks, embryonic, until the end of the 8th week, and fetal, from the 8th week to labor. These phases refer to the different developmental stages of a baby. Information on the development in the mother's womb became available only after observations done with modern devices. Yet, just like many other scientific facts, these pieces of information are imparted in the verses of the Quran in a miraculous way. Another important aspect of the information mentioned in the verses of the Quran is the developmental stages of a human in the mother's womb. It is stated in the verses that in the mother's womb, first the bones develop, and then the muscles form, which wrap around these bones. We then formed the drop into an embryo, and formed the embryo into a lump, and formed the lump into bones, and clothed the bones in flesh, and then brought him into being as another creature. Blessed be God, the best of creators. Embryology is a branch of science that studies the development of embryo in the mother's womb. Until very recently, embryologists assumed that the bones and muscles in an embryo developed at the same time. For this reason, for a long time, some people claimed that these verses were in conflict with science. Yet, advanced microscopic research conducted by virtue of new technological developments has revealed that the revelation of the Quran is word by word correct. These examinations showed that the development inside the mother's womb takes place in just the way it is described in the verses. First, the cartilage tissue of the embryo ossifies. Then, muscular cells that are selected from amongst the tissue around the bones come together and wrap around these bones. This event is described in a scientific publication with the following words. During the 7th week, the skeleton begins to spread throughout the body and the bones take their familiar shapes. At the end of the 7th week and during the 8th week, the muscles take their positions around the bone forms. In short, man's developmental stages as they are described in the Quran are in perfect harmony with the findings of modern embryology.
Until fairly recently, it was thought that a baby's sex was determined by the mother's cells. Or at least, it was believed that the sex was determined by the male and female cells together. But we are given a different kind of information in the Quran, where it is stated that masculinity or femininity is created out of the sperm poured forth into the womb. That he created pairs, male and female, out of a drop of sperm, as it is poured forth. The improving disciplines of genetics and molecular biology have scientifically validated the accuracy of this information given by the Quran.
And what we see.
It is now understood that sex is determined by sperm cells coming from the male, and that the female has no role in this process. Chromosomes are the main elements in determining sex. 2 of the 46 chromosomes that determine the structure of a human being are identified as the sex chromosomes. These 2 chromosomes are called XY in males and XX in females because the shapes of the chromosomes resemble these letters. The Y chromosome carries the genes that code for masculinity, while the X chromosome carries the genes that code for femininity. Formation of a new human being begins with the cross combination of one of these chromosomes, which exist in males and females in pairs. In females, both components of the sex cell, which divides into 2 during ovulation, carry X chromosomes. The sex cell of a male, on the other hand, produces 2 different kinds of sperm, one that contains X chromosomes and the other Y chromosomes. If an X chromosome from the female unites with a sperm that contains an X chromosome, then the baby is female. If it unites with the sperm that contains a Y chromosome, the baby is male. In other words, a baby's sex is determined by which chromosome from the male unites with the female's ovum. None of this was known until the discovery of genetics in the 20th century. Indeed, in many cultures, it was believed that a baby's sex was determined by the female's body. That was why women were blamed when they gave birth to girls. However, 13 centuries before human genes were discovered, the Quran revealed information that denies this superstition and referred to the origin of sex being not with women, but with the semen coming from men.
When the sperm of the male unites with the ovum of the female, the essence of the baby to be born is formed. This single cell is known as a zygote. It will instantly begin reproducing by dividing and eventually become a piece of flesh called an embryo. The embryo, however, does not spend its developmental period in a void. It clings to the uterus, similar to roots that are firmly fixed to the earth by its tendrils. Through this bond, it can obtain the substances essential to its development from the mother's body. Here, an important miracle of the Quran is revealed. While referring to the embryo developing in the mother's womb, God uses the word alaq. Recite, in the name of your Lord who created man from alaq. Recite, and your Lord is the most generous. The meaning of the word alaq in Arabic is a thing that clings to some place, Certainly the use of such a specific word for the embryo developing in the mother's womb proves once again that the Quran is the word of God, the Lord of all the worlds.
In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Welcome to Islam for Dummies. Today we will be talking about a scientific fact mentioned in the Quran regarding the male reproductive system. It is important to point out that while the Quran is not a science textbook, many of the latest scientific discoveries were revealed in Quranic passages 1400 years ago. This is in stark contrast with the Bible, which contains numerous scientific errors. For example, regarding genetics, in Genesis 30:37-42, Jacob changes the characteristics of animal offspring by having their parents look at white stripes while mating. First, we will examine the Quranic verse that describes the location of seminal fluid prior to being discharged. The literal translation of the Quran, chapter 86, verses 6 and 7 is,
Man is created from gushing water, which comes out from between the backbone and the ribs.
in other words, just prior to gushing or coming out of the body, seminal fluid is located between the backbone and the ribs. At first glance, a layman might think that semen comes out from the testicles. While the sperm is produced in the testicles, neither is the sperm nor is the seminal fluid, which is essential for natural fertilization, anywhere near them prior to ejaculation. The verse specifically mentions the entire fluid of semen, and not just the sperm component. So let's examine the process of emission, where all the components of semen are joined. Sperm is stored in the epididymis, which is not in the testicles, but above them. The sperm, which comprises 2 to 5% of the seminal fluid, travels from the epididymis, up, through the vas deferens duct, and around the bladder. Together, the seminal vesicle and the prostate gland produce 90% of the fluid in semen. This mixture travels through the prostate, and is joined by mucus from the bulbourethral glands, just below the prostate. It is at this point that semen is fully formed, comprising both the sperm and the seminal fluids. As we can see, just prior to coming out of the body, all components of semen are mixed near the prostate, which is centered in the body, between the backbone and the ribs, or between the spine and the chest, which is between the back and front of the abdomen or torso, and most certainly not in the testicles or in the lower body at all. Someone might object to this by saying,
the ribs are too high to say that the prostate is between the backbone and the ribs.
To this objection we answer that the head is still between the shoulders, even though it is too high, and the genitals are still between the legs, even though they are too high. Now, let's check the verse again.
Man is created from gushing water, which comes out from between the backbone and the ribs.
This precise scientific description could not have been known 1400 years ago, and even today many people don't know it, as we will see next. Second, we will examine some false claims regarding the scientific accuracy of this verse. In reference to this verse, Answeringislam.org quotes a mistake by Dr. William Campbell.
We are left with the very real problem that the semen is coming from the back or kidney area and not the testicles.
In fact, as we saw earlier, semen does not come from the testicles. Only the sperm is produced there, which comprises 2 to 5% of the semen. The sperm cells travel to the prostate, where 95% of the gushing semen is produced. Next, let's also listen to the false claims of the person discuss Islam about this verse.
This description reflects the view of Hippocrates, common in the 5th century, that semen comes from all the fluid of the body and passes through the kidneys on the way to the penis. We now know that it comes from the testicles.
First of all, Discuss Islam also falsely claims that semen comes from the testicles.
We now know that it comes from the testicles.
It is quite astonishing how those attacking Islam make the same layman errors without checking their facts. In any case, the Quran does not contain the scientific errors of Hippocrates' view, such as that semen comes from all the fluid in the body, and that semen passes through the kidneys. As a result, contrary to discuss Islam's misrepresentation, there is no similarity whatsoever between this Quranic passage and the view of Hippocrates. Furthermore, let's examine some more of Hippocrates-related scientific errors that are, again, not in the Quran. Number 1, that sperm originate in the brain. Number 2, that both men and women produce sperm. Number 3, that healthy sperm is produced by healthy parts of the body. And number 4, that stronger sperm results in males, while weaker sperm results in females. In conclusion, the Quran clearly mentions the scientific fact before it was known about where semen becomes fully formed before gushing out. Semen includes the sperm and seminal fluids, which are both absolutely required for natural fertilization. The Quran accurately states that this fluid is between the backbone and the ribs prior to coming out of the body, as seen from the profile view of the male anatomy. Those attempting to discredit this Quranic verse only succeeded in displaying their own ignorance about the male reproductive system. In addition, trying to ascribe the numerous scientific accuracies from the Quran to philosophers like Hippocrates, who could rarely avoid scientific errors on any matter, is obviously quite ridiculous. As we have demonstrated, misrepresenting both the scientific facts and the views of ancient societies is not only the strategy but a fundamental requirement for people attempting to refute the Quran's overwhelming signs. We sincerely hope you enjoyed this episode of Islam for Dummies, and we hope to see you again next time.
The film you're about to see explains how a human being is created, and which stages he goes through to come into existence. This film is about you. Let us now take a brief trip in time and go back to the past. Let us study an extraordinary story, one full of miracles. Let us see what a human being once was. A single cell in the mother's womb. A helpless thing in need of protection, smaller than a grain of salt. You too once consisted of this single cell, just like everybody else in the world. And then this cell divided, becoming 2 cells. Then they divided and became 4, then 8, and then 16 cells. The cells continued dividing. First a piece of flesh emerged, then this piece of flesh took shape. It developed arms, legs, eyes. It grew 100 billion times larger than the initial cell, and 6 billion times heavier. God performed a string of miracles and created the human being you are watching in this film, who was once just a drop of water. He revealed to man how he created him in the Quran in these words. Does man think that he will be left uncontrolled, without purpose? Was he not once a drop of ejected semen? Then he became a clot. So he created and fashioned him and made him into 2 sexes, male and female. Is he who does this not able to bring the dead to life? Wrapped up in our daily lives, we are most of the time unaware of the one most important miracle taking place before our very eyes. This miracle is the miracle of creation in human beings. The first miracle of creation begins in a woman's body, in the organ called the ovary, with the maturing of a single egg cell. There is a long journey ahead of this maturing egg. It will first enter the organ known as the fallopian tube, then travel through this for a long distance and finally reach the mother's womb. Shortly before the mature egg is released from the ovary, the fallopian tube gets ready to catch it. With sensitive movements, it tries to locate this egg cell on top of the ovary. As a result of this search, the fallopian tube finds the maturing egg and pulls it into itself. And the egg's journey has begun at last. The egg is obliged to travel the whole of the fallopian tube. But it has no organelles to help it to do this. No fins or feet, for instance. For this reason, a special system has been created for the egg's journey. Billions of cells on the inner surface of the fallopian tube have been charged with ensuring the egg reaches the womb. These cells position the tiny hairs on their surface, called cilia, so that they lie in the direction of the womb. In this way, they send the egg cell in the correct direction, as if passing a very valuable item from one hand to the next. Consider this for a moment. These tiny hairs are part of a highly intelligent plan and have been situated just where they need to be in just the shape they need to be. All of them together, they perform a carrying motion in a unified direction. If one part of these cells did not carry out their function, or if they performed their function in different directions, the egg would not reach its target and birth could not take place. God's creation, however, is flawless, and every cell carries out the task assigned to it without error. In this way, the egg cell progresses straight to the place which is being specially prepared for it, in other words, the mother's womb. But the egg cell, being so carefully carried, has a lifespan of only 24 hours. If it is not fertilized within this time, it will die. It needs a vital material in order to be fertilized: the sperm, which will come from the male body. A sperm is in fact a cell, the function of which is to convey the genetic data of the male to the egg cell in the woman's body. When it is examined closely, sperm looks just like a machine specially designed to carry this load. The front of the sperm is covered with armor. There is another layer of armor under the first, and under this second layer lies the cargo carried by the sperm. In this cargo are 23 chromosomes belonging to the male. All the information concerning the human body, right down to the finest detail, is carried inside the chromosomes. In order for a new human being to emerge, The 23 chromosomes in the sperm have to unite with the 23 chromosomes inside the mother's egg cell. In this way, the first foundations of a person's 46 chromosomes will be laid. The armor system at the head of the sperm will protect this valuable cargo from all danger right through its journey. But the design in sperm is not limited to this. There is a very powerful engine in the middle of the sperm. The end of the engine is connected to the tail of the sperm. The power produced by the engine turns the tail like a propeller and enables the sperm to move swiftly. Since there is an engine in the middle, it will need fuel to make it work. This need has been thought of, and the most productive fuel for the engine, fructose, has been placed in the liquid surrounding the sperm. In this way, the fuel for the engine is provided throughout the length of the journey it will undertake. Thanks to this perfect design, the sperms head rapidly straight for the egg cell. When the length of the sperm and the distance traveled are considered, it emerges that this is relatively as fast as a speedboat. The production of these miraculous engines is carried out in a most expert manner. Inside each of the testicles, the sperm production centers, there are microscopic tubes of a total distance of around 500 meters long. The production inside these tiny tubes works just like the conveyor belt assembly system inside a modern factory. The sperm's armor, engine and tail parts are assembled onto one another in turn. What emerges as a result is a real wonder of engineering. We have to think a little in the face of this reality. How do these unconscious cells know how to prepare the sperms in the appropriate form, despite the fact that they know nothing about the mother's body? How have they learned to make the armor, engine, and tail that the sperm will need in the mother's body? With what intelligence do they assemble these components in the correct order? How do they know that the sperm will need fructose? How have they learned to build an engine that runs on fructose? There is but one answer to all of these questions. The sperms and the seminal fluid that they are placed in were specifically created by God for the continuation of the human race.
Pusule gelmiş olması gerekir. Halbuki şöyle bir düşünürseniz, sperma hücreleri baba organizmasında yapılmaktadır. Görevleri ise anne organizmasında husule gelmektedir. Ve dünya kurulalı beri, yani insanlık aleminin tarihinde hiçbir sperma yaptığı görevden sonra, anne organizmasındaki görevinden sonra baba organizmasına tekrar dönüp kendisini yapan hücrelere neler yaptığını, hangi güçlüklerle karşılaştığını, görevinin ne olduğunu söylemek imkanına sahip değildir. O halde nasıl oluyor da sperma hücresi organizmada mevcut binlerce çeşit hücreden çok çok ayrı bir yapıya sahiptir? Sperma hücresi nereden babadan aldığı genetik yükü ileride hayat vereceği bir organizmaya götüreceğini biliyor ki başında, önünde bir zırh taşımaktadır. Sperma hücresi ileride bir hücrenin zarını delmek gerekeceğini nereden biliyor ki zırhın arkasına yerleştirilmiş bir takım kimyasal silahları birlikte götürüyor? İşte görüyorsunuz, sperma hücresinin bütün bu yapısını, yaptığı görevleri, üstlendiği olayları tesadüfen olması, tesadüfen yapması, hatta bilerek tekrar ede yapması mümkün değildir. Burada Allah'ın yaratıcının kendisini nasıl görevlendirdiğini ve bu görevi nasıl mükemmel şekilde ifade ettiğinin en açık belirtisidir.
This wonderful planning in the design of sperm is in itself a miracle of creation. In fact, God draws special attention in the Quran to the creation of the seminal fluid in which the sperms exist. It is we who have created you. Why then do you not accept the truth? Have you ever considered that seed which you emit? Is it you who create it, or are we the creator? Some 250 million sperms at a time are sent to the mother's womb. This number is deliberately kept high because as soon as the sperms enter the mother's body, they find themselves facing lethal dangers. There is a dense mixture of acids in the mother's reproductive organs designed to combat bacteria. This acid mixture is also fatal to sperms. Within a few minutes, the walls of the womb are coated with millions of dead sperms. A few hours later, most of the 250 million sperms will have died. This acid compound, which is most important for the mother's health, is so powerful that it can comfortably destroy all the sperms that enter the womb. In that event, fertilization could not take place, and the human race would come to an end. But God, who created the sperms, has also created precautions against the dangers that they will face in the mother's womb. While sperm is being produced in the man's body, a basic compound is added to the fluid that contains the sperms. This compound partially eliminates the effect of the acid in the mother's womb. Thanks to this, a number of sperms pass the mother's womb and manage to reach the entrance to the fallopian tube. If you'll notice, the sperms all travel together in the same direction. But how do they find this right direction? How do they know where the egg, no larger than a speck of dust, is? The sperms find the way to the egg because another perfectly created biological system comes into action. The egg gives off a chemical signal to attract the sperms, which are about 15 centimeters away from it. The sperms head straight to the egg thanks to this signal. In short, the egg cell, which knows nothing about the sperms and has never come into contact with them before, calls them to it. Two cells, perfect strangers to one another, engage in communication. This reality is another proof that egg and sperm are created in the most ideal form for each other. Finally, around 100 sperms manage to reach the egg. Yet the race is not yet over, because only one sperm will be allowed inside the egg. So another race begins. There is one particularly important obstacle confronting the sperms. This is a hard protective layer surrounding the egg, which kills off any unwanted microorganisms that may approach it. it is also extremely difficult to penetrate. In order to overcome this obstacle, special systems again are created in the sperm. Underneath the armor in the sperm's head, it houses secret weapons, which it has so far concealed. These are tiny dissolving enzyme sacs. These little sacs make a hole in the protective layer by dissolving it, and the sperms can then enter this layer. While the sperm is moving ahead inside the layer, the armor at the end gets worn away, eventually falling apart. The falling apart of the armor is part of the perfectly functioning plan, because thanks to this, the second set of enzyme sacs inside the sperm can emerge. These enable the sperm to overcome the last obstacle facing it, in other words, the piercing of the eggshell. You are now looking at pictures taken by an electron microscope. The sperm has red-colored armor. This armor melts away, and the sperm enters the egg through its shell. The flawless conception in the coming together of sperm and egg does not end here. As soon as the sperm reaches the eggshell, yet another miracle takes place. The sperm suddenly abandons the tail, which has brought it all this way. This is essential, because if the sperm did not do so, the tail, which is constantly in motion, would enter the egg cell and destroy it. The discarding of the tail section resembles the way a rocket might jettison its spent fuel tanks on leaving the atmosphere, having no further use for them. But how can the tiny sperm make such a fine calculation? In order for the sperm to be able to make this calculation, it has to know that it has come to the end of its journey, and therefore has no further need for its tail. But a sperm is an unconscious biological machine, which has no intelligence and is not able to perceive its surroundings. God, who creates sperm, created it together with a system that enables the tail to fall off at just the right moment. The sperm, abandoning its tail, pierces the egg and deposits the load, in other words, the chromosomes, through the hole it opens up. The process of the carrying of the genetic data in this way comes to an end. As a result of the harmonious functioning of hundreds of different and independent systems, genetic data regarding the man's body reaches the egg cell. As we have seen, even just the union of sperm and egg is only possible thanks to a perfect planning and design, leaving no room for any coincidence. Even if people are not aware of it, the intelligence and planning seen in every part of these events are clear proofs that human beings are created by God. You are looking at an egg cell which is not yet joined with a sperm. The genetic data of the sperm and the egg are side by side. But one of the greatest miracles in the world is about to happen. Two sets of genetic information are about to mix with one another to form an entirely new human being. And union has happened. This first cell is called a zygote. It may be hard to believe, but inside this cell is all the information regarding a person as yet unborn. The unborn baby's eyes, complexion and hair color, the shape of his face, and all his other physical features are encoded here. And it's not just his appearance, but also his skeleton, internal organs, skin, veins, and even the shape and number of the blood cells circulating in those veins, and all the other details of his body that are determined here. Everything is determined and written in this cell. From a person's features at age 7 to his features at age 70. Shortly after fertilization, the cell will perform another very surprising action. It divides and 2 new cells form. Then these cells divide again and become 4 cells. The construction of a new human being has now begun. But why does the cell decide to divide? Why does it have the task of building a new human being? Who gave the cell the knowledge to build a new person? These questions lead us to the existence of God, possessor of infinite intelligence and power, who created us, the world, the human being in that world, the cell in that human being, and the entire universe around it. At this moment, you're seeing the journey inside the fallopian tube of the constantly dividing and multiplying cell. This collection of cells is known as a morula. As the cell cluster divides and multiplies, another astonishing thing happens. Some cells start to grow different to others. The old cells gather in the center, and these are surrounded with the new cells, which are growing into a different kind of cell. A short time later, the group of cells in the center will form the embryo. In other words, the first cells of the baby to be born. And the group of cells around these will form the placenta, which will nourish the embryo. Cells beginning to grow different from one another and deciding to form the embryo or the placenta is accepted by the world of science as a great miracle. There is a secret order which makes these cells do this. About 4 days after fertilization, the dividing cells reach an area specially prepared for them, that is to say, the mother's womb. In order not to be expelled from the body, they have to cling on to the womb. However, the newly forming embryo is a round cluster of similar cells. It has no special hook or extension to enable it to cling on anywhere. So how does it stick to the wall of the womb? This too has been taken into account. When these cells reach the wall of the mother's womb, a special system goes into operation. What you're now seeing is a cell cluster which has just reached the mother's womb, seen now under an electron microscope. The cells on the very outside give off a special enzyme which dissolves the womb wall. In this way, the cells cling tightly to the womb and avoid being expelled from the body. The presence of these cells, which are both in the right place and which release the necessary enzyme, once more reveals the perfection of creation. Thanks to this flawless creation, the cell cluster is buried in the wall of the womb. This new living creature which sticks to the womb and begins to grow, is now known as an embryo. This truth, discovered by modern science, revealed an important miracle of the Quran. In the Quran, God uses the term alaq to refer to the first phase in the mother's womb. Read in the name of your Lord, who created. He created man from alaq. Read, and your Lord is most honorable. Alaq, in Arabic, means a thing which holds on to somewhere. The word is even used in describing certain parasites which stick to the skin and suck blood. In other words, in the Quran, which was revealed to us at a time when man's knowledge of biology was still very limited, a word is used which exactly describes the embryo in the mother's womb. This proves once more that the Quran is the word of God. Countless number of single-celled creatures live in our world, which is a planet full of life. All of these single-celled creatures multiply by dividing and form exact copies of themselves as they do so. The embryo developing in the mother's womb also begins life as a single-celled creature, and the cell multiplies by copying itself. In this situation, unless there were a design, the cells of the unborn baby would all turn out to be the same, and what eventually would emerge would not be a human being, but a shapeless mass of organic matter. But nothing like that happens, because the cells are not unsupervised. A few weeks after the sperm and egg have come together, the cells start to differentiate, obeying a secret command which is apparently given to them. We are now witnessing this change, which is described as a miracle by all scientists. The unconscious cells have set about building the internal organs, the skeleton and brain. Brain cells have begun to form in these two small gaps. This view you are now seeing, taken under an electron microscope, is the first development of the brain. Brain cells will multiply rapidly here, and as a result of this growth, the baby will possess some 10 billion brain cells. We are now seeing the formation of the brain cells. Every minute, 100,000 new cells are added to this collection. Each new cell that forms behaves as if it knows where it belongs, and which cells it has to make connections with. Each cell finds its own place. Out of an infinite number of possibilities, it joins only to the cell it needs to. There are 100 trillion connections in the human brain. In order for brain cells to be able to make these trillions of connections properly, they need to demonstrate an intelligence far superior to that possessed by humans. However, cells have no intelligence at all. And not just brain cells. Each of the dividing and multiplying cells in the embryo heads from the place where it first formed straight to the point it has to occupy, and each one finds the place designed for it. And here, whichever cells they have to form connections with, they also do. So who is it who makes these cells, which have no awareness, follow this intelligent plan?
bir yere gelir, rahme gireceği yeri seçer ve oraya yapıştıktan sonra aynı olan bütün bu hücreler nasıl oluyor da birdenbire bir yerden bir emir almış gibi hepsi ayrı ayrı yerlere göç ederek ayrı ayrı organların oluşmasını sağlamaya çalışırlar. Bu açıkça gösteriyor ki bu aynı olan hücreler, ne yapacaklarını bilmeyen hücreler, bütün genetiği, DNA'ları aynı olan hücreler bir yerden bir emir alarak bazıları beyni, bazıları kalbi, bazıları ise diğer organları teşkil ederler.
Construction inside the mother's womb goes on unceasingly. Some of the cells undergoing change suddenly begin to expand and contract. Following that, hundreds of thousands of these cells come together, and these make up the heart. This heart will continue to beat for a lifetime. In a short while, we'll see a real miracle. These cells, which stand independent of each other, are in fact vein cells. Then these cells suddenly start to join onto each other and form connections between themselves, and the cells form the veins. Let's see that magnificent sight again. How have these cells learned that they have to form a vein, and how can they do it? That is one of the questions that science has not yet found an answer to. The vein cells eventually make a perfect tubing system with no cracks or holes in it. The internal surface of the veins are smooth, as if made by expert hands. This perfect vein system will soon begin to carry blood to every part of the baby's body. The length of the vein network is more than 40,000 kilometers. That is almost as long as the circumference of the Earth. Developments in the mother's womb go on non-stop. In the 5th week, the embryo's arms and legs become visible. This bump will later turn into an arm. Some cells will then begin to form into hands. But in a while, some of these cells will do a most surprising thing. Thousands of them will commit mass suicide. Why do these cells kill themselves? The dying cells perform a crucial function. The bodies of these cells, which die along a specified line, are necessary for the formation of fingers. The remaining cells begin to eat the dead ones, and empty spaces appear in these regions. These empty spaces are the gaps between the fingers. Why do these cells make such a sacrifice? How is it that a cell can kill itself so that the baby can have fingers in due course? How does the cell know that its death will serve such a purpose? All this once again shows that all the cells which make up the human being are directed by God. At this point, some cells have started to make legs. The cells cannot know that the embryo will need to walk in the outside world. But still, they make legs and feet for the embryo. You are now looking at the face of a 4-week-old human being. At this stage, 2 holes develop, one on either side of the embryo's head. It's hard to believe, but the eyes will be constructed in these holes. Development of the eyes starts in the 6th week. The cells operate with an unbelievable plan for months, and one by one form the different regions of the eyes. Some cells build the cornea, some the pupil, and others the lens. Each cell stops when it reaches the limit of the region it has to build. And the eye, which consists of some 40 different components, is constructed flawlessly. In this way, the eye, which is accepted as the world's most perfect camera, is brought into existence from nothing inside the mother's womb. It has been borne in mind that the person to be born will open his eyes to a world full of color, and an eye has been built which is ideally suited to its perception. The sounds this as yet unborn person will hear and the music he will listen to have also been taken into consideration. The ears which will listen to that music are also constructed in the mother's womb. These cells make up the finest sound reception instrument in the world. These scenes remind us once more that sight and hearing are in fact great blessings that God has bestowed upon us. God puts it this way in the Quran: "And God has brought you out from the wombs of your mothers while you know nothing, and He gave you learning, sight and hearts, that you might give thanks." All the information that we have so far given regarding the development of the embryo in the mother's womb has emerged from scientific research in the last 30 to 40 years. And this new information has enabled more new miracles of the Quran to be grasped. Until quite recently, it was thought that the bones formed at the same time as the muscles. But the latest research has revealed a truth that human beings were unaware of. First, bone tissue develops in the embryo, and then muscle tissue forms around the bones. The interesting thing is that this newly discovered fact was revealed 1400 years ago in the Quran. We then formed the drop into a clot, and formed the clot into a lump, and formed the lump into bones, and clothed the bones in flesh, and then brought him into being as another creature. Blessed be God, the best of creators. On the other hand, scientific research into birth has shown that the baby goes through 3 stages in the mother's womb. This fact is described in the following way in a textbook on embryology, Basic Human Embryology. Life in the womb goes through 3 phases: pre-embryonic, the first 2.5 weeks, embryonic, up to the end of the 8th week, and fetal, from the 8th week to birth. This information, which was come by with the use of modern technology, the result of long years of research, was nevertheless given in the Quran some 1400 years ago. These 3 phases in the mother's womb are announced in the Quran in this way: He creates you stage by stage in your mother's wombs in a threefold darkness. That is God, your Lord. Sovereignty is His. There is no God but Him. So what has made you deviate? The instrument you can now see on the screen is a medical tool which possesses some of the world's most developed technology. It is a life support system which people in intensive care are linked up to. But this entire room full of high technology pales by comparison to another far more developed system of biotechnology. This superior piece of equipment is the placenta, which surrounds the embryo in the mother's womb and meets all its needs. The placenta is like a kidney dialysis machine, a heart-lung machine, and an artificial liver. It carries out all these functions at the same time. It is a wonderful design which enables mother and baby to live. The cells which make up the placenta recognize the food particles from the millions of molecules in the mother's blood and allows these to reach the baby. Another of the placenta's duties is to protect the embryo. The defensive cells in the mother's body flow towards the womb to attack the growing embryo. But cells on the very outermost layer of the placenta form a kind of filter between the mother's veins and the embryo. They allow the nutrient molecules to pass, but not the immunity cells. If the job of taking care of the growing embryo's needs had been given to a human being and not the placenta, then the embryo would not survive more than a few minutes. Because mankind does not possess the kind of technology, it would need to calculate the embryo's changing needs and then meet them. The only piece of technology sufficiently sophisticated to carry out this function is the placenta. This cord enables the link to be formed between the baby and the mother's body. This cord, which is cut and thrown away after birth, is in fact a true wonder of engineering and carries out vital tasks for 9 months. It contains 1 vein and 2 arteries. The vein carries food and oxygen to the embryo. Thanks to this, the embryo does not drown, even though it lives in a liquid-filled environment and its lungs are full of water. It does not die, even though its digestive system has not yet been constructed and it cannot eat. Both of these 2 basic needs are provided for the embryo through its placenta. The arteries remove the carbon dioxide and waste food products from the baby's body. Neither the mother nor the embryo growing in her womb are aware of these systems and processes. As the months pass, the baby in the mother's womb takes shape and grows. It becomes ready to step into the outer world. The time has now come for the final stage, birth. but there is a great deal of danger for the baby waiting in the mother's womb. The baby will be born by passing through the mother's womb and between her pelvic bones, posing a great threat to the unborn child. During birth, the baby's head will be squashed in these narrow areas, and its skull will come under pressure. But here again, a special precaution has been taken to protect the baby's health. The bones in the skull of the newborn baby are soft. Furthermore, unlike those found in adults, the bones which make up the skull are not fused together. Thanks largely to this, the bones are able to slide onto one another during birth. The gaps between the bones stop the skull from being crushed during this process. In this way, the baby is born healthily, and its skull and brain come to no harm. In the months that follow, its skull will harden, and the baby will lead its life in a healthy way. The stages of development that have been recounted throughout this film have happened to every human being in the world. Everyone was hurled towards the womb as a sperm cell joined with the egg, thanks to the specially created conditions there, and then began life as a single cell. Even before they had the slightest idea of their own existence, God gave their bodies shape and created a normal human being from a single cell. It is the duty of everyone in the world to consider this fact. And your duty is to consider how you came to be and to be grateful to God. Do not forget that our Lord, who created our bodies once, will recreate us after our deaths and will hold us to account for the blessing He has bestowed upon us. This is very easy for Him. Those who forget their own creation and deny the afterlife are greatly deceived.